most of us can agree that there's no better time to be an audiophile than right now. The options available to hi-fi and home theater enthusiasts are seemingly endless, and for the most part, products are good, often packed with features and sound quality that once cost a lot more. And with things being so good, it's no wonder that consumer expectations are at an all-time high, which may explain why manufacturers are creating more products than ever before as they, try to appeal to everyone. As a reviewer, even I can sometimes struggle to make sense of it all. Choosing the right product is stressful, especially when making the wrong choice can be even more costly than ever before. Take Marantz, which just so happens to be the brand that we're reviewing today. With any review, I really try my best to put a product into perspective. In the past 24 months, we have covered the Model 10, the AV10, and the AMP10, and that's not even the full list. So when Marantz sent me their new preamp processor, the AV20, and its matching multi-channel amplifier, the AMP20, for review, the biggest challenge for me was where do these products fit in, much less how do I distill 2 years of products into a digestible video that actually helps you, the viewer. So let me do my best to break down their newest processor and amplifier, starting with the AV20, which is the line's preamp processor. It supports 13.4 channels using both balanced and unbalanced connections, 4 independent subwoofer outs, 7 HDMI 2.1 inputs, all of which support signals up to 8K 60, 4K 120, 3 HDMI monitor outputs, one of which supports ARC, eARC, full Dolby Atmos and Vision support, Odyssey Multi-EQ XT32 and Dirac Live compatibility, full wired and wireless connectivity, HEO streaming with native support for many of today's popular platforms, which include Qobuz and Roon readiness. As for the AMP20, you get 12 total channels of amplification rated at 200 watts per channel into 8 ohms and 400 watts into 4, albeit with only 2 channels driven. Marantz states that power output is rated at 200 watts per channel into 8 ohms with 5 channels driven, though they don't specify what the amp's multi-channel 4 ohm rating is. Similar to the AMP10, you can configure the 20 in a number of ways, including using its assignable channels for bi-amping or bridge mode. In either case, the total number of channels drops to 6, but power increases to 400 watts. Of course, you get both balanced and unbalanced connection options, as well as a few control and trigger ports, not to mention an auto shut-off feature. However, there is no signal sense power on option, which is kind of a head scratcher. I get that I could use a trigger cable to power on the AMP20, the old-fashioned way, but signal sense is a convenience one shouldn't have to go without in 2025. Now, to put the Marantz combo through its paces, I enjoyed the system in various ways, ranging from 2-channel listening to a full Dolby Atmos setup. For the front, left, and right main speakers, I use Wilson Audio's new Watt Puppy Towers. These speakers have a nominal impedance of 4 ohms. However, they can dip below 3 ohms, which makes them a trickier load for many amplifiers and a perfect test for the AMP20. For surround and Atmos channels, of course, I relied on our Klipsch in-ceiling speakers. For subwoofer duties, I dusted off the KEF KC92. I connected the AV20 and AMP20 together using balanced interconnects and connected the rest of the setup, which included our Apple TV, PlayStation 5, and TCL's QM8K to the AV20 using high-speed HDMI cables. The AV20's on-screen display or even its IP-based menus makes setup a breeze. Now, once manually set up, I was able to make adjustments to my settings using the included remote or from within the Marantz AVR app or HEOS, which continues to improve with each new iteration. Additionally, I was able to configure the AV20 in 2 distinct ways using the processor's preset option. Preset 1 using Odyssey's room correction, which is included with purchase. Now for preset 2, I use my preferred room correction Dirac, which is available at an additional fee. Speaking of Dirac, the AV20 supports both Dirac Live as well as Dirac Bass Control. Dirac Art, or Dirac Active Room Treatment, is reportedly scheduled to arrive via a firmware update, although as of my evaluation, that update hasn't yet taken place, so I wasn't able to test it. For those of you unfamiliar with Active Room Treatment, according according to Dirac, ART will allow you to essentially enjoy sound from any speaker as if you were sitting in a perfectly acoustically treated room. In other words, no more unsightly panels or bass traps. Rumor has it the ART update is coming later in the year, though according to Dirac's website, the upgrade looks to cost an additional $299 on top of the bundled price of $599 for both Dirac Live and Bass Control, meaning to get the full suite of Dirac software up and running on the AV20, you're looking at an additional out-of-pocket cost of just under $900. I'm a big fan of Dirac and am particularly fond of their bass control software. Still, facing another $900 out-of-pocket cost when discussing a $6,000 processor doesn't leave me with the warm fuzzies, especially considering you can get Dirac Live included with purchase in products like Onkyo's RZ70, which retail for less than $2,500 and can also be used as a home theater processor just like the AV20. The Onkyo supports nearly as many channels, and you could use its internal amplifiers, which are quite good by the way, or use a third-party amp like Emotiva's XPA whatever and save quite a bit of money. But regardless of your feelings about Dirac and its pricing, there's no denying the software's effectiveness. The desktop software worked seamlessly with the AV20 and was more responsive when uploading filters to the AV20 compared to the AV10 or other Marantz receivers. In fact, the AV20 may be the most trouble-free implementation of Dirac that I have tested yet. Now, if you decide not to splurge on Dirac, Marantz does offer you Odyssey. As for how the two room correction solutions compare, I found Dirac to be more accurate in its settings and corrections. For example, it set distances and channel levels, which is better accuracy and consistency when running multiple, measurements versus Odyssey. I also find that making my own adjustments to the Dirac curves to be more intuitive overall. However, this likely has more to do with Dirac working on my Mac, whereas Odyssey, I have to rely on the app or a PC. When it comes to the sound of the AV20 and AMP20 combo, the pair reminds me a lot of my experience reviewing the AV10 and AMP10. Based on my experience now with both systems, I'm not confident that there would be enough, if any, audible difference between them when paired with identical speakers and playing back A to B in the same room. The 20 sound is neutral in tone, neither warm nor bright overall, with natural detail and texture retrieval and solid control throughout. However, some of you may find that other amplifiers provide a more engaging, snappier, or visceral experience, especially if you focus on its bass. Through the AV20 and AMP20 combo, the Watt Puppy's bass was tight and well dampened, but it lacked that last ounce of snap or explosiveness these speakers are capable of. If amps like the DVLA Astra on the Wilsons represent a 10 out of 10, the AMP10 on the Watt Puppies was a solid 8. When watching movies and engaging Dirac bass control, the sound tightened up a little bit, no doubt aided by the presence of a properly placed subwoofer. However, the combo's more audiophile-oriented pure direct mode, and when listening in stereo, the bass was controlled, but just not the most dynamic or contrasty. The mid-range and treble performance was all Marantz all of the time, whether you were listening to music or watching a movie. I don't know how else to describe it other than to say, I don't believe that you're going to mistake the AV20 AMP20 combo for anything but a Marantz. I found dialogue or vocal intelligibility to be good, though maybe a step or two recessed behind the front baffles, which may be why Christy had the subtitles on whenever the Marantz was connected. Treble was airy, even a bit weightier than most, but never harsh, forward, or fatiguing, which I appreciate. In many ways, especially when listening to music in the AV20's pure direct mode, the resulting sound was reminiscent of Marantz's costlier Model 10 integrated amplifier. Neutral and easygoing with a solid sense of detail, but nothing that stood out, in a showy way. And if you prefer that type of presentation, then the 20 combo could be a more cost-effective alternative to the Model 10. Now, as far as surround sound is concerned, again, the Marantz combo is impressive. I think that when using Dirac bass control and a dedicated sub in the KEF KC92, the whole system gained a little bit more dynamic snap and became more thrilling down low, especially especially during spirited listening, something that I've noted in the past, Marantz reviews. Given that the Watt Puppy speakers border on beyond reproach, at least for me, I was very impressed with how well the Marantz gear, with some help from Dirac, blended these truly reference-grade loudspeakers with our existing Klipsch in-walls, resulting in some of the more thrilling Atmos experiences that I've had in a while. When it comes to two-channel listening through imaging champs such as the Wilson, the Marantz didn't rob them of any of their dispersion. With specific genres of music like rock or electronica, dynamics were ever so slightly subdued unless I really let loose and opened the taps. As for the rest, HIOS worked well. The AV20 passed all of my PS5 gaming benchmarks and worked flawlessly with all of our associated equipment throughout our entire evaluation. So perfect 10 out of 10 there. All right, to any of the Marantz representatives and fans of the brand who may be watching, I have some notes that I need to share with you. This doesn't mean that I hate you, the products, or the hobby, okay? I understand why the AV20 and AMP20 exist, especially when considering that at their price points, they have already taken into account the absolutely ridiculous and arbitrary tariffs running roughshod over the global economy. To that end, I get it. But similar to how I felt when discussing Samsung's Q990F last week, the AV20 and AMP20 don't feel wholly new, but rather reissues of products we've already seen. And for those who may not yet own a Marantz AV10 or AMP10 or any Marantz product, the new 20s, financially at least, make significantly more sense as an option, but that isn't to say that their existence would provide would-be or even existing Marantz customers with a new or improved experience. They are yet another option in an ever-growing portfolio of options, all of which are wearing the Marantz badge. And this problem is something I think we're all noticing in the industry lately. The AMP20, and for what it's worth, the AV20 get very hot, reaching temperatures of 120 degrees or higher at the chassis. Mind you, this is not after watching a 2-hour movie at movie theater-like volumes. This is somewhat the pair's everyday, just, percolating temperature. So be aware and allow for proper ventilation and cooling, especially when installing them into a cabinet or rack. When it comes to room correction software, you all know Dirac ranks high on my list, if not number one. While there was a time when allowing customers to add Dirac licenses at their own expense made some sense, nowadays I really struggle with Marantz's decision to simply not include it, especially at these prices. It is getting increasingly challenging to find a competitor that doesn't include Dirac software with purchase. So my question to Marantz is this: why are we still nickel and diming customers here? If you've gotten this far, then it shouldn't surprise you that I don't see a reason to consider the 20s if you already own the AV10 and AMP10. And this isn't a knock against the 20s, it's just kind of a statement of fact. If you don't own the Marantz 10 combo and can get by with the 20's fewer channels, you're going to save $4,000 by going with the 20s. If you're looking for more specifics, please be kind and rewind or maybe even watch our AMP and AV10 review here. Coming off the Macintosh review of the MX200 processor, which I tested with and without the Marantz AMP20, there is no denying that you get more channels, features, and customization with the Marantz AV20 for your money. Sound-wise, it's a toss-up, especially when relying on the AMP20 for power, as the MX200, didn't change the AMP20's dynamics or just general personality over what I experienced with the AV20. Now, if you choose to pair the MX200 with one of Macintosh's multi-channel amps, such as, let's say, the MC257, things could sound and perform a bit differently. Regardless, going with an all-Mac setup is going to cost you more than the Marantz combo, so despite my affinity for Macintosh, if I were putting together a separates-based Atmos home theater in 2025, I would consider the AV20 and AMP20. The benefits of spending more on the Mac gear may not be wholly appreciable all of the time. However, the decision to go separates over a more traditional receiver, such as Marantz's own superb Cinema 30, or our reference Sony 7000 ES, or the Dirac-enabled monster like the Onkyo RZ70. Now, this is a tough one. If you own difficult-to-drive speakers like Watt Puppies or have a penchant for watching movies at true IMAX theater-like levels, by all means, invest in something like the 20s. However, for the rest of you, and I do mean this with every fiber of my being, you will likely be just as well served by opting for an AVR, even a more expensive one like the Cinema 30. At $5,000, the Cinema 30 is less than half the cost of the Marantz 20 combo. As long as your speakers aren't absolute power hogs, I am not convinced the 20 combo represents double the performance over the Cinema 30 or any of the aforementioned AVRs. However, the real comparison I wanted to explore and answer, at least for myself, is whether a separate home theater setup like the AV20 and AMP20 makes sense or could be seen as an alternative to the more audiophile-centric Marantz Model 10 integrated amplifier. While I know, or I can imagine, that on paper or in some laboratory, the 10 is going to eke out some mildly more minute and frankly mundane measurement figure better than the 20 combo, and for some of you, that is all that matters. While I am not suggesting that measurements aren't important, you know that I feel it is equally important to consider what it's actually like to live with the product and where the rubber meets the road, in the real world, listening to, real, often imperfect music in real spaces with real lives unfolding around them. The 20 combo is not only every bit as good, it may be a better investment when shopping the Marantz brand. I mean, you get comparable sound, but so much more flexibility and adjustability, not to mention expandability should your tastes, needs, and desires change, enabling you to broaden your horizons into multi-channel or distributed audio for less. So as far as which product is the best long-term investment at these prices, I'm talking $12,000 for the combo versus $15,000 for the Model 10. The smarter buy may actually be the AV20 and AMP20. Whew, so that's it. That is now my take on Marantz's new AV20 and AMP20. What did you guys think? What did you guys think of this product? And frankly, I think we've now reviewed everything in Marantz's lineup. So how would you break it down? What would you do? Where does this fit in the grand scheme of things? I want to know. Let's get a conversation started. So sound off in the comments. In the meantime, remember, the only person who ultimately has to like the sound of your system, though, is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. And enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.